Isaiah Harwell might be the most underrated five-star freshman in all of college basketball. Let's lock in and find out why.
You are Locked On NBA Draft with no ceilings. Your daily podcast on the future stars of the NBA. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back to Locked On NBA Draft with no ceilings. Thank you as always for making us your first listen of today. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if that bet hits, you get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. If you're interested in a deal like that, head over to FanDuel.com to get started today. My name is Albert Gim, and I'm joined, as always, with my co-host, PhD in the pick and roll and the pepperoni pizza, Corey Tulaba. Corey, I like to ask, like, how are you doing? Whatever. I was watching a TikTok video recently where they're like, if you want to be interesting, don't ask people how they're doing. Ask them better questions. And one of them, which he was like, ask them to rate things out of 1 to 10. So I'm going to ask you, Corey, how's your week going? How would you rate your week so far on a scale of 1 to 10?
Well, you know what? I've consumed 3 bottles of Poland Spring water today. So that would be a 10 amongst my coffee, which is a little inside joke because Albert and I are both from New York. We get Poland Spring drinking water, and Albert can no longer get Poland Spring drinking water as he moved across country to LA. It is, if you know, you know. It's one of those kind of situations.
Yeah. No, Corey, man, that one hurts. It really does. But it's something I think about all the time because as much as I love living in Los Angeles, not having Poland Spring in my fridge or at my local drugstore or bodega, it's painful. And I drink, like, I don't know what we have out here. Mountain Valley, Dasani, kill me. But
garbage.
Maybe worse. But Corey, it's great to be back. And, you know, as pure as Poland Spring water is, we've got a player today who offensively might be as pure as Poland Spring water, as pure of a shooter as Poland Spring water. We're talking about a guy named Isaiah Harwell, who's going to be playing his freshman season this year, Corey. So we've got a really interesting player that we want to break down. Corey, as always, our PhD in the pick and roll and pepperoni pizza. Let's get in the lab and give us our essentials for Isaiah Harwell.
All right, so Zai Harwell headed to Houston. As you said, he's a freshman. He finished 14th in ESPN's 2025 Top 100 Recruiting Rankings. He is a McDonald's All-American, and he will start out at number 41 on the first No Ceilings big board that has not been released yet. As far as measurables go, he is 6'6", 220, listed at least, rumored per ESPN with a 6'10" wingspan. Draft night age, he will be 19.6 years old. So Synergy, our friends, shout out to them, had 14 games at Wasatch Academy for Zay. So those stats are 16.2 points, 5.6 rebounds, 2.6 assists to 3.8 turnovers. So it's a 0.7 assist turnover ratio, 1.8 steals to 0.7 blocks, 46.9, 37.3, 66.7 shooting splits, 54 effective field goal, 56.5 true shooting. So a lot to like with Isaiah Harwell, and some things that he needs to work on, and we're going to break that all down.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Corey. I think when you kind of threw it over to me, I think it was like the end of last week when we were like, should we do Isaiah Harwell? I was like, I'm 100% on board. This is a guy that I find myself, I might, you know, you just mentioned on our unreleased No Ceilings big board that he's in the 40s. I'm definitely on the other end of the spectrum a little bit aggressively, where I have him in my lottery. I have him in my top 14, but you know me, Corey. When I kind of find a prospect that I like, I go pretty intense.
Yeah.
And early on, before the season has started, just off of the high school tape and just off of what I've seen with the very limited film that we have, I find myself very intrigued. And I think, Corey, the biggest thing with me with Isaiah is I find him to be a very intriguing offensive player. And I think I'm at a point right now in the preseason where I have him comped to some very high level scorers in NBA history. And obviously, don't want to get into that yet. But Corey, let's start the conversation here with his offense, right?
Mhm.
I think with him, the first thing that stood out to me was that his range was kind of limitless. Very confident shooting from very deep outside. I just felt like his overall scoring and offensive mindset was a little bit interesting too. This is kind of a critique slash just an observation, but I thought like his offensive game was not what I thought it was going to be once I got like really deep into his film.
Mhm.
I thought that his demeanor on the offensive side of the ball kind of went here and there. And what I mean by that was there were times when I felt like he was very aggressive, and other times where I felt like he kind of sat back and was willing to be like a supporting role player.
Mm.
And I feel like he kind of wavered back and forth, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. It could be, if we look at it in the positive way, it's like, oh, he can be an on-ball guy, but also play off-ball as well, right? That's one way to put it. But I also felt like there was like a almost like a teaspoon of aggressiveness that was missing at times that I kind of wanted, because another thing that I want to highlight before I throw it over to you, Corey, is I thought for his age, his frame was excellent. There's
Oh,
some
yeah.
real strength and power to him. But the thing that kind of irked me at times was that for as strong and powerful he was for his age, I didn't feel like he leveraged that all the time. There were opportunities where I felt like he could really, drop his shoulder and, be physical with guys to get all the way to the cup or to get a cleaner look for himself, where, instead of doing that, he would either, pass the ball off or settle for a mid-range jumper. Now, final thing I'll say, the mid-range jumper is where I was very happy with him. I
Mm.
thought that what I wrote in my notes, Corey, I don't think he's a mid-range technician yet, because there are certain aspects of his game that he needs to tighten up, but he is very comfortable there. And I thought he did a really good job there at times. So wanted to throw it over to you, Corey. What were some of the things that you observed with Zai Harwell and his offensive repertoire?
Yeah, well, first, like you said, the big physical frame, and we're huge on strength. And when you're talking about wings, especially young wings, one of the challenges to getting on the floor early is just being able to handle the physicality of the modern game. So him, coming into that Houston system where their strength and conditioning program is second to none. I mean, they always post their preseason picture, and the guys are just brolic and shredded. Like they manage to stay lean while also being really strong. So that's a great thing that he has going for him on both ends of the ball. But I got to actually see him at the McDonald's game, and it kind of like you said, where he can almost fade in and out. Now that's the type of game, all-star setting, where it's like,
right,
guys kind of have to hunt their own shot, but it's also because guys are hunting their shot, it's hard to stand out and get your looks off. So he ended up not doing much in the first half, and then he had 16 in the second. He just went like nuclear and started, draining shots from all over the floor, which was really fun. And he really stood out in a positive way. But in his film, you see kind of where you say some of the, because he's strong, you felt like he could dip his shoulder. I think part of that is because as a driver, like he doesn't have the shiftiest handle.
Yes.
He's kind of like a little stiff as a mover. So he doesn't have as much side to side. So when he does get an advantage, it's almost the defender's still kind of with him and in front a little bit. So he can't kind of use his shoulder to bump off to the side necessarily. Because if he's using his shoulder, he might be like committing a charge and going through somebody. Now he does have like a counter where he likes to spin off.
Yes.
But he doesn't have as many counters like where Kyrie can get deep in his bag and stop and start and, like go east to west and then north to south. He's not that kind of ball handler and creator. And then he doesn't have as much vertical pop to go through guys, but he's strong. And you kind of wish that he was better at the rim. He was 54% overall, 51% in the half court. He had 9 dunks, 2 in the half court. So, you want to see him use that strength and that length a little bit more effectively. But where he does thrive there is that he has a really good floater game. And, that in between game, like he was 64% on runners, which is a really strong number. So while he's not as adept at the rim yet, he does have, that kind of in between game to kind of offset the improvement area being at the rim. But he's a good shooter. Now, it looks good coming out. Like you said, he's got great range. He can get hot in a hurry. I think he can create a little bit. He's comfortable shooting off the dribble, but he's, he can't string a ton of combos together. But 38% on dribble jumpers, really good. 40% on catch and shoot jumpers, same number, guarded versus unguarded. So he's got some versatility there. He's not like a big time movement guy, but like, he can move off a flare and whatnot. So there is a lot to like as far as his versatility. And when you look at him in the context of like where his strengths are, he is, I think, the kind of guy that could be a really great complementary wing. And because he's strong on top of being, 6'6" and long, there is some positional versatility where I don't think he has to necessarily just play the 2 or the 3. Like there might be a world where one day he's also playing some small ball 4 in spurts as well. I don't think that's, going to be his natural position unless, he comes in a little taller than we think when measurements come out, if he ends up measuring. So, but he does have good size and strength, and that's going to allow him to play, to swing between a few positions. So there are some interesting things. The free throw percentage bugs me because we like when the 3-point percentage matches the free throw percentage, and 37% from 3 overall is good, but 67%. I'm monitoring the free throw percentage this year, and he's not a big time free. He doesn't get to the line like a million times a game, but I do think that I want to see that more closer to 80 to see be like, all right, he's a legit shooter.
Yeah. Corey, just a couple of things that I want to piggyback off of what you said. You mentioned how there's a real opportunity for him to be a very good supporting role player. Something that I noted here in my notes is that I think, and this is just like a me thing, and obviously could just be my bias, I kind of felt that if he could tweak a couple of things, and I'm actually going to highlight what those things are, I feel like he could actually be like a number 1 option guy in the future.
Interesting. Okay.
In the future. And I'm talking about like even like 3, 4, 5 years into his NBA career. Like I think there's a journey and a path that I'm looking at right now that makes sense to me. The main thing is, and we mentioned it already, Corey, and you mentioned it first, the ball handling. The thing that I wrote here in my notes is that he's not a dynamic ball handler, nor is he a creative ball handler. And at this point in his development with the ball in his hands, there is some clunkiness. And you see it when he's guarded by defenders that guard him tight, that really get into his airspace, that really try to pressure the ball. You see where there are some insecurities with his ball handling. And I think that's something where what I wrote here in my notes is I don't even want him to be more imaginative or creative with his handle. I think he just needs to tighten it up a little bit, whether it's like a Jaylen Brown or Kawhi Leonard type of tightening. You get what I'm saying? Like, or even like a Devin Booker type of thing, where Devin Booker isn't going to hit you with a million different combos, but he's very efficient and smooth with what he does and very strategic about how he handles the ball. And so with that in mind, I'm wondering, with his strength in his frame, and another weird thing about his frame, Corey, he reminds me of like a shorter Paolo Banchero in terms of how he looks aesthetically.
Totally. Yeah.
You know what I mean, right? He's kind of hunched over, big back, big shoulders, but
hips. Yeah.
Right. Hips too. But I think there is a world 3 to 5 years from now, maybe, who knows, maybe even longer, where he could become like a number 1 option type, or a guy who can play the 1A, 1B type of role, whether it is like there are so many different guys that play that role, but you know what I mean? A guy who's kind of like maybe not your main headliner, but can be like a dueling banjos type of situation for your offense and spearheading that. And so for me, Corey, I really liked, and the main takeaway for me is, I like that there are levels to his offensive game. I like that it's not just 3 and dunk. There's 3, there's mid-range. You mentioned the runners, the little push shot that he'll do that he's so comfortable with. I also like that he's very confident in finishing with either hand as well, although we'd like to see more of it, right? And also we'd like to see him pick up more fouls, as we mentioned. But overall, Corey, for me, and the last thing that I wanted to ask you before we go to the next part of his game, was there anything mechanically that bothered you at all? Just because, like, I did feel like at times he kind of did like a lean back type of situation.
That's what I was going to say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's slight, and it's slight.
Okay.
It was a slight lean back, but yeah, it was, there's like a slight balance issue, I guess. But he's got a sturdy base. Like, I think that's something that could be cleaned up pretty easily, and he's been effective. So it's really like you're cleaning up a small micro thing. and just getting comfortable, with that. And I don't see any reason why, even if he doesn't clean it up, he can't be an efficient shooter. And, and that's going to be his role next year. You're talking about down the line that he can develop on the ball next year at Houston. You're going to have a couple of guys who are going to be ahead of him in that backcourt,
Right.
that are going to have the majority of the usage there with Milos Uzan. And so whatever he could do as like a secondary creator and shot creator is, I think, what will be interesting to see. But even if he doesn't get a ton of those reps, he's got enough with that shot, even with the imperfections as is.
Right. No, absolutely, Corey. And as you mentioned, he's walking into a very specific context playing for Houston. And the thing we know about Houston is they like to play tough defense. And after the break, we're going to get into some of Zai Harwell's defense, and we'll get right into that after this break. Most people can't really name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, right? Whether you've got a 401k or stocks or bonds or gold bricks at home, you have all kinds of things, investments as well. But when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving some money on the table. And that's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy to use interface on your laptop or on your phone. So Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you've put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. Monarch does all that heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and kind of finally feel like you're in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. As we've mentioned a million times, Corey and I were young dads with young families, and we think about our money all the time and different opportunities where we can set up our family and our kids for a brighter future. And having a tool like Monarch Money is really important because it really kind of organizes things for you and shows you where you might have some holes in your finances. So don't let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNBA. We are back, Corey, and we are playing defense. Or we're talking about defense, and we're talking about Zai Harwell's defense. And, I kind of mentioned this before we went to the break, Corey, but something I wrote here in my notes, this is the side of the ball that I think will define his freshman season. And also, more importantly, this may be the deciding factor in whether or not he's a one and done, is what I wrote in my notes. I think that the defensive side of the ball, obviously, once again, because of the context that he's in, is more important than even his offensive game, because I think he's got some serious things that he needs to work on this side of the ball. And so, Corey, if you can lay out for us what were some of your observations after watching some of Zai Harwell's defensive film.
I thought that he plays hard on this end. I don't think that Houston recruits guys who don't play hard defensively. So he has the measurables that they like with the long wingspan. He's strong. I think he's going to be able to, execute their defensive schemes because I think that he does care about this side of the ball. When he's off the ball, he's keeping his head on a swivel. He's not necessarily losing sight of his man all the time. So he's pretty fundamentally sound on that end. And I think that shows, he's got pretty decent stock numbers, 1.8 steals, 0.7 blocks in those games for the sample that we have per synergy. He's not perfect on the ball, but I think because of his size and his motor, like he's still effective, but I think his hips are a little tight. His feet can be a little heavy. So he can be a little slow to like flip his hips and change directions. But he does sit in a stance and play with effort. Sometimes he crosses his feet instead of sliding, ultimately, I think that he is a pretty solid defender who I think, can look really good in their scheme and has the potential to be a guy who, if this is where the focus is, and I think this is what the coaching staff is probably gonna be like, hey, like you want to get on the floor, defense is going to be where you bread your butter. And he does little things that I like. He's willing to sacrifice his body and take a charge. He'll guard the length of the court He plays with grit and toughness, and I think some of the improvement areas are things that are going to get worked out by the coaching staff and just you know, with more experience and coaching. So I'm into him, as a defender. He also, one thing I noticed, he doesn't always find a body to box out, which, if you give up offensive boards, I think that gives you a free ride on the pine pony. So, that's something to monitor. But ultimately, I think he cares. And I think he's got good enough tools that, like, he's not going to be a disaster because of his effort level, because of his tools, even if there are things to clean up.
Okay. No, I think that's a very fair evaluation, Corey. I think for me, though, man, I had a slightly different lens.
Okay.
I'm with you. I think the measurables, I even think the effort is there, right? I don't want to question his effort or even his concentration. The one thing that I didn't love at times, and I think it was like in correlation with what happened on the other end of the floor, I thought sometimes when he was expending a lot of energy on offense, I feel like when he came back on defense, there were at times some not so great habits that I saw. So I want to throw this out there by saying I don't think this is like the norm for him. I think it's just a couple of instances that I saw on film that it made me write them down in my notes, where there were a couple possessions where I saw, like, maybe because he was gassed, maybe he was thinking about what happened on the other end of the floor. But there are a couple times where, like, he had his arms by his side. He actually wasn't in the stands for a couple of the possessions that I saw. And he kind of like got crushed by screens. And then there were a couple like sloppy gambles that I didn't love. But overall, Corey, the reason why I'm kind of like putting this as like a blip in the radar is because of what you said, right? I do believe the overall macro view of his defensive tape is that it is good, right? I do think there's a lot of good effort, but I also think maybe it's like a youth thing where because he's still a teenager, where there are these moments where mentally he might get a little down on himself, and then, he kind of loses stuff on defense. But I did want to highlight, and maybe this is like just for me in the future, where if he does kind of end up, let's say, for whatever, well, no, not whatever reason, but let's say he falls out of the rotation. I feel like if that were to happen, I'm going to remember this conversation and some of the stuff that I saw on film, because maybe Coach Sampson will look at him on the floor doing some of those things, whether it's in a moment or two, and be like, hey, young man, I'm going to pull you out. We're going to turn this into a teaching moment, and you're going to spend a couple of weeks on the pine. It could happen, is what I'm saying, because we know how Coach Sampson is and how he keeps his team so accountable, especially on this end of the floor. I kind of wanted to keep this as like a mental note for me and for us, that if something like that were to happen, there may have been some breadcrumbs in terms of his high school film as well.
No, I think that's completely fair. And I think that you're right about that. I mean, look, there's very few prospects who are dialed in 95 to 100% of the time.
Yeah.
And I think Zay is definitely needs to be accountable for some of the things he needs to work on. I think that shows up like when he's just ball watching instead of finding a body and boxing out, like, and even sometimes when he is giving effort, he isn't perfect with some of the things that I mentioned. So these are all things that he needs to be aware of. And as you mentioned, he won't be on the floor. The coaches will have no problem using, teachable moments with him, because they have a lot of depth, right? Like they don't need to rely on him. Like I said, they have Uzan, they have Emmanuel Sharp in the backcourt. This is not somebody who they need to play a big role. I think the dream would be that he can play a big role, because that would boost their chances of winning a national championship if he comes out of the gate and plays like, a 5-star prospect. But he definitely has things that he's gonna have to clean up on both sides of the ball, outside of the defense and, some of the scoring stuff we talked about, like the playmaking thing, field needs to improve as well. There are things that he's going to have to prove as a decision maker on both sides that to earn those minutes.
No, absolutely, Corey. And I think the most important point that you made is that because he's not walking in and having this he's not walking into Houston and like they're not looking at him like he's Cameron Boozer or AJ DeBanza or Darren Peterson, right? He's coming into a context where they are looking at him as a supporting player. to go with Uzan, right? And the rest of their roster. I think that's a really important point, because with him being in that context and not having that burden on his shoulders, that might lead to a lot better defensive effort and concentration and highlights, right, on the defensive end of the floor. So I totally agree, Corey. I think ultimately he's going to be a good defensive player. And I'm really excited to see what he looks like in this system. And more importantly, with his offensive game and his defensive game, there are some NBA players, both current, past, whatever, that definitely remind us of Zai Harwell. And we'll get into those comps right after the break. The NFL season we're in the thick of it, right? We're starting to learn some things about different teams and divisions, and it's starting to get really interesting. But right now, new customers with FanDuel can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. If you pick a bet, you put down $5 and it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. And this is such a great time for, if you've always been hesitant, now's a great time. We've got Thursday Night Football, an NFC East matchup between the Eagles and the Giants. The Giants are kind of feeling themselves right now. They've got a new quarterback, right? They've got a young running back in Cam Scatabo. Maybe this is the week they pull off a big upset, right? I mean, currently they've got one win, but they're going against a division rival. I think the line right now, let me look at it right now. Eagles are -7.5. Maybe the Giants, they walk in, they're like, hey, we're gonna be spoilers here. There are a lot of fun bets, prop bets you can bet on as well. Maybe Jalen Hurts anytime touchdown. That seems like a lock every single week with the tush push. Or you're feeling Cam Scatabo and you go Cam Scatabo anytime touchdown. There are a lot of different options, and especially when we have a game like the Eagles and Giants, it's going to be an intense rivalry game. There are a lot of options that you can bet on. But regardless of what you end up pick, what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started right now. We are back, Corey. It's our favorite time of every episode. We're getting into our comparisons. Why did I say the full word? It's always comps.
The government.
The government is we're getting into comps now, Corey. And I think a player like Zai Harwell, who, very interesting offensive player, dynamic offensive player, interesting on the defensive side of the ball as well. He could, remind you of some really good NBA players. People are going to hate my comps. I already know it, because I went way far on the deep end and people are going to hate me for it, but it's okay.
No, I love it.
I'm okay with shooting my shot. But Corey, give us your comps. Who are some guys that you were reminded of?
First guy, and I think if he can become this guy and play a similar role even, this is where I think he could get into the same territory of a guy that of where you have him ranked currently. I picked Carter Bryant. Carter Bryant last year was a guy who, I mean, we had been a fan of for years. We had seen him at the Nike Hoop Summit, like when he was a junior and a senior, playing not for the Hoop Summit team, but playing for the Portland Generals scrimmage team, who caught our eye. He played a small role last year for Arizona. We kept saying we want to see more of him, but he was efficient as a shooter. He locked down on defense, and he made that his identity as a guy who could shoot, get out in transition, knock down open shots, not have to do much off the bounce, just be efficient on both sides of the ball. Carter Bryant, I think, is going to be a little bit taller. He measured 6'6.5" without shoes at the combine, a nearly 7-foot wingspan. So Zai Harwell, might not be far off. Who knows? Maybe he measures it 6'5.5" without shoes. We'll see what he measures at, because he doesn't look tiny out there by any means, and he has that reported 6'10" wingspan. So if his wingspan checks out, maybe there's a Carter Bryant kind of outcome. I don't think he's as athletic as Carter Bryant, so I don't think he's the same caliber prospect, but stylistically, there's some of that. Christian Braun as another guy. Again, maybe he doesn't have the same bounce, but defensive-minded, kind of spot-up shooter who attacks closeouts, keeps the game simple, can create a shot a little bit, but isn't relied upon. But, you put him in the right system, playing off of guys, can really thrive. Maybe some Dylan Brooks, if he becomes more of the shot creator type, who's being a little more willing to go out and try to get buckets. Dylan Brooks was another guy his freshman year, struggled kind of with playmaking feel. So maybe there's a little Dylan Brooks. I have so many for Zay Harwell. Aaron Naismith, I don't think he shoots 50% in like Naismith did his draft year, but Naismith got hurt. But this is a guy who had to really fight his way to carve out his role as an NBA player and focus on the defensive side, really hone in on that. And then high end, if his feel improves as he gets older, because this guy was a 4-year player. And I think maybe because of the strong frame and kind of like the stiffness in their movements a little bit, Desmond Bane, super high end. I don't know. I don't think he's the shooter of Desmond Bane, but maybe as a 3-point guy, he can get there. The free throw percentage might be where, the pure shooter that Bane is, but some conglomeration of all of those guys together, though I see bits and pieces of each of those guys.
I love those, Corey. The reason why I love yours so much is that they are so different from mine. And I think this will be the first time ever in all the years that we've potted together that our comps are going to look so wildly different. Now, I do want to kind of preface this by saying the reason why they're going to be so different is because the lens in which I looked at him through is very different from yours. As I mentioned before, my brain, for whatever reason, is projecting him to one day be a number one option. And of course, I'm fully ready to be wrong, as I've been wrong many times before, as our fans love to remind me. I have 3 very different comps.
Okay.
I'm going to go from low end to high end.
Great.
The first thing that I need to say as like a kind of like a qualifier thing with him is that I actually think Zai Harwell might actually be 6'4".
Okay.
I think because of his big frame, he looks bigger, but I actually think he might be like 6'4"-ish, maybe with shoes 6'5". Okay. That's that.
Great.
Okay. First guy I have on my list is Norman Powell.
Okay.
I look at
I
Norman
thought about
Powell.
him.
Okay. I think of Norman Powell as like my base level guy. A guy who turned into an unbelievable scorer, really important for the Clippers last season. Just got traded, but still like just a very, very fun offensive.
Near all-star.
Near all-star. Okay. Next guy. This is very high end as well. People will hate this, but I'm thinking future. Bradley Beal was another guy that came to my mind, right? Obviously, there are things that Zay needs to work on to ever get to that level. But if you think that is lofty, my next guy, people will absolutely hate me for. I went back and watched his college film all morning today. I looked at his role that he played for the team that he played on as a freshman, very limited in his role in college, grew into his game in the NBA, Olympic gold medalist. I thought of Devin Booker. Now, I need to explain myself a little bit here. Okay. So like in college, Devin Booker was very much in his one season at Kentucky, had a very niche, clear, defined role. You're going to be a floor spacer for us. If they hard close out on you, you're going to attack the rim. He loved that little push shot in the lane like Zay does. He showed off a ton with his mid-range shooting ability. I get it. This is very, very lofty for Zay to become Devin Booker. But to my earlier point about his offense, if he can clean up the ball handling a little bit and he becomes a little bit more efficient and strategic with his movements, the fact that he is as comfortable as he is in the mid-range with his push shot and his outside shooting, I wonder if there's a path where in his lone season at Houston, he has a Devin Booker-esque role like he had in Kentucky, and then in the NBA is given a little bit of a runway to grow into some of the more nuanced areas of the offensive side of the ball, where he then becomes this final version of himself, where he's a dominant NBA scorer. That's all I'll say, Corey.
I get it, especially early on. I mean, Devin Booker did not have a big time like stats in college. What do you average? 10 points per game. I think he had like 13 rim attempts or something crazy like the entire season. Like you said, it was a very, very simplified role. But look, no one projected Devin Booker to be Devin Booker, right? So if you see it, like, I'm with it. Look, I projected him as high end as Desmond Bane. Desmond Bane averaged 24, 5, and 5, in 23-24. So if you're crazy, you're crazy.
Yep.
And the worst thing is that people find this clip on the internet and bring it up next to Jet Howard, or maybe it allows them to move off. When we still believe, So look, I like it. I like, I've definitely thought of Norm Powell. That was a guy that I thought of. I think I thought of Eric Gordon a little bit, like maybe post prime Eric Gordon a little bit when he wasn't as athletic. But yeah, there's a wide range of outcomes.
Right. I also thought of like Ben Gordon, Corey. I had him in my notes too. But overall, Zai Harwell, a really interesting prospect that we're going to be monitoring very closely this season. We really hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We've got more exciting content coming for you this Friday. But as always, I'm Albert. He's Corey. Thanks for rocking with us.